and welcome back to another episode of International Immersion, a podcast where we seek to connect various people, cultures, and ideas and present them in a platform where people can learn about them and explore the wide world around us. So for today's episode, we have my good friend Andy back again for yet another episode, and we thought it'd be interesting to discuss what he thinks of the United States, since he is currently a undergraduate student in the United States, although due to COVID-19 he's had to return to Argentina temporarily until the situation improves. But regardless, we thought it'd be very interesting to hear what he thinks of the U.S., since he's not a citizen, but unlike a tourist, he's going to be living here, and he has lived here for well over a year, and once things return to normal, will continue to live here for another year or two at least. So Andy, it's great to have you back again.
Oh, thank you, Sean, as usual, for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to be here. The U.S., right? It's a beautiful country. I just want to begin directly by saying, right, that like my education right now, it's only possible because of the good people in there that have recognized me, and they're giving me all of these opportunities. It's always important to be thankful for what we got, and I just wanted to begin straight away by saying that I'm very thankful to the U.S. Despite what many people, there's always arguments on both sides, but I just want to say first off that my education is thanks to people in the U.S. They're supporting me over the process.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that, and it's great that you've had the opportunity to study in the U.S. because I think, like we've discussed on previous episodes, being able to study outside of your home country can be an amazing experience and give you so much more than if you just remain in your home country. So,
absolutely.
So,
it's not that everybody can access, particularly in the U.S., for international students, and you see many people trying to apply there because they're seeking, the best of the best, and as such, it is very selective. So.
No, I agree, and especially depending on where they want to apply to. I mean, there's a lot of universities in the U.S., but there's only so many with the reputation known globally, and they can only have so many. They can only take in so many at a time. So that's very true. So to begin with, I was thinking, what was your first impression of the U.S.? So when you got approved, you were going to come here. So when you first arrived here, that first time arriving here in the U.S., what was that like?
Well, I just remember a funny anecdote that I want to mention. I would say my first impression in U.S. soil was when I was doing my visa at the Argentinian Embassy. You can also consider that U.S. soil. So, and when you're waiting on the queue to get to the people, the beautiful, that's the interview, it feels like an airport environment, like the immigration area. And I remember they have this video, like some sort of screen, doing publicity about the U.S. And I remember seeing this video about Montana. Have you been to Montana before?
No, it's on my to-do list though.
Well, I don't know about you, but it looked like a beautiful state. That one.
Montana is an amazing state. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful.
Some cowboys. It was I haven't visited yet, but I remember feeling at that moment, wow, I'm in for a journey.
So you're already getting some samples of what may come to be just at the consulate.
No, absolutely. Yeah, so that was it in there. Then the time came to actually go to the U.S. And the city in which I was living is Philadelphia. And Philadelphia has a lot of history. It's known for, I believe it was the first capital.
That's correct. It's the first capital of the U.S., and that's where the U.S. government.
They have the Liberty Bell. They have this beautiful building, this historic area. What's the Constitution signed there as well?
Yeah, because Washington D.C. wasn't founded until later. Philadelphia was the first capital, and that's where the early the early Congress and the people and the organization that became the U.S. government. That's where they were first based before the British kicked them out early in the war. But
so I arrived there, and even though it's a very modern city, I think one of the first things I did, I just headed straight over to like where you could see the bell, and I was there thinking, wow, to think that this country like it began in here. This is where like all of the history, all of what they have accomplished. It exists as a result of what occurred in an historic moment many years ago in this one place. So that definitely felt very interesting, and yeah, I thought it was just like a beautiful place. Um, I would say like very first impressions is that folks were very well receiving, even though I'm speaking from a biased point of view because I'm in a university, so like you're kind of expected to be well received anyways. But with my personal encounters with like people on the city that weren't part of the university, they were also really nice. I did get lost many times on my bicycle exploring the city, so yeah, I received a lot of help from them. In Philly, it was also where they filmed the Rocky. So I went over to like the south part of the city where like, there's a couple of scenes from there, and that is a truly a maze. So yeah, I did get lost, but my people there were really nice.
That's one thing I have found from talking to many people from overseas, in many countries. That's one thing that they all generally tell me is that people here or Americans are pretty well receiving and they're if you go to them, they'll gladly help you and they're very friendly.
They're very
most of the time.
Absolutely. And another thing that I did notice when I was like there's many things that I see from my bicycle. There's basically like a bicycle tour in there. It wasn't like hard for me to see that. Also if I don't know whether you can consider Philadelphia, like the U.S. itself. It's just a city, like not all the country, but it was still a very diverse city. When you go there to South Philadelphia, I also went over to the north of Philly, and those are neighborhoods that they have a lot of like immigrant communities. For instance, in the South, I believe I passed through. There's a big Filipino community there, if I'm not mistaken. But there was like lots of different people from different cultures. So. And they were like, you would see like the local, well, I mean, they're already citizens of the U.S., right? But you would see like, I don't know, like people that have lived in the U.S. for longer than them interacting like super nicely. It was like everything was going well. It still goes well, but it's just like you could see that there were no problems at all. Everybody just existed together normally.
I'm sure there are problems because every city has its problems. But yeah, I mean, that's one thing I have noticed that a lot of the immigrant communities, as they come to the U.S., they do, I say, assimilate pretty well. I mean, of course, they're going to hold on to their traditions, beliefs, and other things, but generally, across the board, people assimilate pretty well here because, I think a big part of that is people don't like. It's not like they're forced to learn everything. They kind of buy into it. They like it. Oh wow, I can do all this, and that's why so many immigrants they become some of the best business owners and and people get involved in their communities because they appreciate it even more to an extent.
Absolutely. I mean, we're speaking about people, for instance. This is something that I know because of the people that tell me I've spoken with in the university. For instance, like Cuban Americans, they left their country, but with enough effort and perseverance, it's not that the U.S. is a wall for you. Like possibilities exist. It's not an easy process, of course, because otherwise everybody would be succeeding. But if you truly want to, resources will be there, and that is also in part what I saw. We'll speak more about like my version of like what I perceive as the American dream in a moment. And I just wanted to say that it's definitely possible. Like it's not there. Everything is possible. Yeah.
No, I completely agree with you on that, and I think that's one thing that a lot of people, if you are willing to work hard, put the time and effort, and learn, you can definitely achieve a higher status or whatever you want to call it in the U.S. I mean, of course, depending on where you're from, what situation you're born into, and so many other factors, those all can either improve or decrease the chances, but regardless, it's in the end of the day, it's up to the person of what they can do with their lives, and so on and so forth.
No, totally. There's another point that I also thought about is that In the same case that I was given the possibility to go to the U.S. by my university, I think also about all of the other students, also from the U.S. That they are also at my university and many others, and I think about all of the effort that they put to be where they are, their achievements, the work that they've done, and it makes me feel that the U.S. is truly, at least in great part, the U.S. works around the concept of meritocracy. Because if you do put effort into what you do, you will be recognized eventually. You good, see that good. You work hard, you'll succeed. You'll be. That is also related, to why even though you might be an immigrant, just you do your part and you'll be able to receive your part as well. You're a student, you do your part, you'll be able to be admitted at a good university, and you have resources to succeed there as well with your education, and so on. There's always, you can find always how would I say, there's loopholes to this idea because when you have so much money, right? Like meritocracy doesn't. You just have the money, so you can buy yourself a ticket to wherever you need to be. But in general, I would say that what I saw is that people who deserve it are where they need to be.
Yeah, I'd agree. And as an American, I can see a lot of that, and I think that's one thing that I don't want to brag, but I am proud of that aspect about being American. The fact that you can come here and you can in a large or small part make something of yourself, and I think one big plus of that is that we don't expect people to come here and just conform completely. All we really ask is that they contribute, they accept the values and beliefs that we have here, but beyond that, you can keep your religion, you can talk what you want to talk about, you can do what you want to do as long as it doesn't hurt other people, and that's real. It matters. So, and I think that environment is what creates the vast creativity and
exactly
here, because we don't really care, well, at least mainstream, we don't care where you're from, what you believe in or whatever. All we care about, if you come here, contribute, don't cause problems, and you're willing to just make this place better for yourself and others, come on in.
No, absolutely. And I just think this word that you just mentioned, a very creative environment, which I completely agree. Let's say so bring again the metaphor of the tour. So I finished touring Philadelphia, and then I end back again at the university where I live, which in itself it's kind of a bubble, right? Because a university towns are usually a small subset of the city, so you don't get to see much of what happens outside. But within my bubble in there, yeah, you see people from all sort of places coming in together, with this one goal of creating knowledge, or if it's not creating knowledge, just learning and trying to expand, if you want to say it poetically, the boundaries of what we know. And yeah, it is a very creative environment, that one, because you see people willing and also able to do very cool stuff, very interesting science. Lots of papers that are coming out from the university every year, every month. And I just felt, on the one hand, I felt overwhelmed because you see, wow, there's lots of things that you can do here. So here's where choice becomes an important thing. Being able to choose what you want to do, how will that help you afterwards, to succeed or whatever. But on the other hand, I said, well, it's an amazing challenge. It's going to be an amazing ride. And so you have those two feelings just juxtaposed, together. As long as you can still be optimistic, right? Because sometimes, right now that I'm not in the U.S., you begin to remember about those things that you felt when you were during your first weeks in there. But those feelings, they begin to go down. You forget them because it feels that you've been living there forever, and you've always been there. So it's you take it for granted. And no, absolutely no. You can't take it for granted, right? You earned it, you work hard, and just don't forget about the work that you've done and how fortunate you are.
Exactly. And the longer you're in a place, we say it kind of breeds monotony. It becomes so normal. You don't think of it's just normal. You don't think as much, or you don't observe as much. So that's just normal. the longer you're in a place, the more like boring it will get, or just okay, it is what it is. This is how it always is. But in reality, it's not.
It's not totally. And I think for me, answering this question is actually, what I feel about the U.S. It's easier not being in the U.S. Because when you're looking at a map, for instance, right? If you're on the map itself, being able to appreciate the details of the map is a rather complicated task. But when you're looking at that map from above, from an outside point of view, it becomes just much easier to see the whole picture there. And that's what I'm feeling right now. I'm able to, look back on my experience, and I can pinpoint you, specific examples and about how I feel about the US, and it also helps me plan and reflect on what I want to do with my remaining time when I have a chance to be back. Also.
No, completely, and it's always like like if you're born and raised in a place, it's like okay, it's normal, and there may be a lot around you, but just because of circumstances and many other factors, it's not like it's like wow. But when you leave and you look back, like oh, that's where I'm from, and or even like in your case when you go there and you come back now because of COVID, and you're like oh wow, that was interesting being there. But I think you can take this view on both your home country and the country you're going to. Once you leave it, you look at it from a further of a distance. It definitely creates a different viewpoint.
If I have to give one example right now about like one thing that you don't really see it while you're in the U.S. because you have it, but one of them is just like the concept of freedom, right? And I see it. It sounds dumb what I want to say, but like let's take for instance the COVID-19 whole situation in the U.S. Right? People might refuse to wear masks, which is a bad thing. People might refuse to quarantine, which is also a bad thing. And you lock down whatever. But it's all, but like why they refuse? Because they can. And even though it's bad, there's like the positive thing I wanna pull out of this situation is like you got the freedom to like there's laws that you need to follow absolutely, but you also got the freedom to actually do whatever you want to do. Which being in here I can't, and here is way more restrictive where I am right now. Even though it's quite a free place, one would say relatively, not as free as like the genuine land of freedom, as like one would call it, the U.S. So that is something, but another way I envision the U.S. It is definitely somewhere where you got absolutely almost every liberty. So much so that it might also be dangerous, right? Because you also see, in the same way you have freedom to express yourself, you can express yourself badly and nicely, and when you express yourself badly, that of course leads to some problems, as we've seen with the current events earlier in the year.
No, and I think for a lot of Americans, unless if you're born and raised here, you may think, oh, it's not that the best or this and that. But when you go overseas, especially countries that don't have the same type of government, that's when you're like, oh, okay, and I think that, and I personally speaking, I wish more Americans would travel and spend time in different countries because I think they would both come to appreciate where they go, but they'd also appreciate the U.S. a lot more, and I think every person from everywhere would have the same perspective. It may be different or to different amounts or what's just a different severity, but I think that would be a common,
I'll tell you something very funny. I just remember, that on when we were back in China, when I was coming back from that scholarship in there, I actually did a stop in Boston. Like that was like the flight did a stop in Boston. I remember that feeling when the plane landed in there. Because I love China. I'll just say that. But when you live in there for 4 months, that love feeling, it might change a little bit. And remember that feeling when the plane landed in Boston. Wow, it just felt that like a whole, like backpack full of rocks had just been relieved out of my back.
Really?
It just exactly like that. It just felt. it really felt amazing. I actually have I have a picture in my phone that I usually see that I took from the window of the airplane at the airport, and I said, I can't believe I'm here. It's like it was like, I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit with that feeling, but it felt like that. That drastic change. It feels like you grab a magnet and change it from north to south. It was like complete different poles coming from that one place to another one. It was just like, even though the U.S. I'm not a U.S. citizen, right? Just that, like landing in there, it did feel like being at home. It was like,
Oh well, that's great to hear, but I mean that's also quite like like surprising me. Just that feeling of landing, you would get that sense just from
just I'm not even setting foot in the country yet. Like the plane landing in there, I felt wow. It was also a beautiful day, like clear blue skies. So perhaps it was literally drawn by God for me. There, I said like, this is my gift to you for like coming to this country. There, and then I think I had a McDonald's burger, to celebrate, which is like the most American way. One with like a cup of Coke and there are some fries. I think it was like a quarter pounder. A classic, in other words.
Very typical of what people here would get, and so that's amazing, Andy. And it's always interesting to hear these perspectives about our countries where we're from different people, and just hearing that from you, like it makes me happy that it really makes me happy, not just that you like the U.S., but more importantly, that's what you got. That's what the sense of what you felt just by landing and both at that time and now studying there, you having these opportunities and it giving you these very positive feelings and also the ability to improve yourself, learn more, etc. And I think that's every human being. That's what we want. If we want to improve, we want to to better our lives and eventually for our families, children, so on and so forth.
Oh, definitely. Thank you, Sean. Really, like sometimes things. Sometimes political, decisions that might be aimed at, targeting, well, let's say, immigrants or international students. Sometimes that feels very badly, but that was like the news a couple of weeks ago. But like one doesn't need to forget, one can't, you can't forget the fact that like even with that, I mean, you've been given a lot already, and it does feel awful to be kicked out. I don't disagree, and there's people who actually, need to be there because their home country might be devastated. But at the same time, people. It's sometimes in life. I don't know if you heard this expression, but it's easier to criticize than to praise.
Oh, of course, and as they say, it's always clear in retrospect. And that's why I think a lot of people. I wish they would think, okay, you can very easily criticize anything. But if you can't bring anything to the table to replace it or suggest, why criticize it? Because you're just criticizing something, but you're not contributing anything to help improve it. So if you criticize it, but then you have ideas or suggestions, by all means, I think that's perfectly good. And
Totally.
and there's also a difference between being like just having objective criticism versus like more, I'd say, malicious criticism. Like if you're just objective saying, well, these are problems here, they are bad, but, we should try to do this versus, oh, they're bad. Let's not do this. I hate this, blah, 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 blah. There's
totally. Yes. Yeah. Bring a solution, right? You're complaining about something, like how can we make that better?
Exactly.
And sometimes, you will be hurt, and in contrast to many other places I have been to in the past, customer service does actually, it does work in the U.S.
Oh, really? What do you mean by that?
My field of services, yes, or perhaps in the university it does. But I can tell in here, right? Customer service is just like, something that has to be there, to be there. But whether or not it's implemented or not, it's just like a different question.
That's a very interesting point you make, because I know a lot of people here, they complain about customer service all the time because it's like, oh, it takes forever. But then again, if you have nothing to compare it to, that's all you know. But If you're making the case that the customer service here is better than back in Argentina, that's interesting.
That is for sure that it's better than in here. But I would say, like at least in the sense that like like Amazon and all these services, like web services, they are constantly asking you for feedback to try and get better. And at least that, whether or not, I do not know whether they implement it, right? Because there's millions of people that are using those, like companies and whatever. So it's hard to go over those 1 million things. But I'm sure that at least one of them has to be like one of those suggestions in those feedback forms will be changed.
And trust me, I buy stuff on Amazon. I use all the a lot of companies for my purchases and things I need, and they're always, hey, fill out the survey. We'll give you this benefit if you do this, or we'll give you 5% off or $10 for your next purchase if you do this for us. They're always trying to find ways to to be better and get more customers, and it's also competition. They want to be better than other service.
Yeah. Well, I guess since we're now speaking about Amazon, that could be a good segue into. Well, there's lots of different things I can speak about Amazon, and these are my own observations over the years. And I think that Amazon is a retail online store, you would say. And one thing I've noticed that like at least in the last few years, I've noticed that personally. Also, given the exchange rate between my local currency and the U.S., like everything for me is expensive, but I don't buy many things. I pay like whatever the tuition is after the scholarship, and that's like my main expense for the year. But like I see, this consumerist society in the U.S., which in one part I love because I just love like like that app in the phone where you need to guess like the logo of like that brand. I love I love brands and I love competition and seeing all of them coming together and doing all sort of products. But on the other hand, all of that exists because there's people willing and able to buy like so much stuff. And
there's a very large consumer base that has the ability, and hence that's the U.S. the middle class. The middle class is like that's what drives the U.S. economy.
We're speaking here, Sean, about things that are, we need clothes, we need a car, of course. That I told you, but we're speaking about things that are so unnecessary, and like people, like that idea of like being able to market a product that you totally don't need, but you can do an amazing ad in TV and whatnot, and just make you feel that you totally need to buy that thing. And that is, think about like the things that you have, and think about also the minimal things that you would need in order to
necessities versus non-necessities.
Yeah, exactly. And then I appreciate the idea of consumerism, but at the same time, you see like at least on campus, you see people like wearing the latest jackets, like those like very fancy brands, and I know they spend a lot of money there, and like all of these like UPS trucks, like unloading lots of Amazon packages in there, and it seemed a little bit unsustainable at some point. Like just try and buying, because if you don't buy it just falls.
Well, right? I'm sure you've heard the adage, Americans don't save a lot. Compared to other countries, the national savings rate is a lot lower than many other countries. And I definitely don't fall in that category because I like to save every penny I can, but that is a big part of it because of the consumer culture and the marketing blitzkrieg, you could call it, of all these companies that make people want to spend. So that's what drives this consumerism, both for things that people need, but even more so for things they don't need, wants or accessories, etc. And that's good in some ways, but it's also bad in others because people don't hold on as much money as they should in many cases.
No, it can totally mess you up. Like you could, like I know, like this, you can mortgage your home. That's like a dangerous thing to do. Sometimes like if you don't have enough money to pay, then you could have a crisis like it happened, I believe, in 2008.
Yep, simple. People buying homes they could not afford. And banks not screening people. A person that makes $30,000 buying a $250,000 home or something like that. Whatever you want to call it. We would like people to be able to do that, but there's also just is it sustainable? And I think a lot of people here,
Absolutely.
it's that instant gratification. Americans are like, oh, I want it now. I want it now. But they don't think about the long-term effects as much. I mean, there are plenty of people who do, but personally speaking, I've seen many examples of this, and it's kind of sad because they just they acquire all these things, then but they can't sustain it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, but on the other hand, also another idea that related also to big companies like Amazon here is that Google, Amazon, yes, they're of course great companies, right? But at the same time, I believe they are slowly developing tools that make them too powerful. To the point that like perhaps they know more about ourselves that we both know about ourselves.
They're
And
becoming, they're monopolizing everything because they're so big.
yeah, it seems that the market tends towards monopoly. The big ones get bigger and the small ones gets absorbed. But at least the positive side is people are they are pretty vocal about this thing. It's not that like people are just with their mouths shut. They do speak about this. So yeah, at least it's a public problem. It's not like other places of the world where nobody would speak about it. It would be just banned.
No, that's very true. And there are a lot of voices out there that are like, hey, Amazon's getting too powerful. Hey, Walmart's too powerful. Or, oh, the cellular companies and the telecom companies, they have a virtual monopoly now because there's very little price difference between them. So there's a lot of discussion and, debate that goes on about that. And I think that's one good thing that I've noticed, as an American, is that most people are not shy to debate or express what they feel and think.
Totally, that is true. So, that is also a curse. The fact that you're not shy to, express what you feel, as I was mentioning earlier, is what leads, on the one hand, to do very, very powerful movements to fight, racism. But on the other hand, also movements that are against that thing, and also groups, that they can criticize whatnot, right? And people that come together, which won't mention right now, but yeah, it's hard, perhaps very polarized to one point.
Yeah, I would definitely say things are quite polarized right now because of what's happened, in recent years and the events that have kind of stoked the flames of that. And it's kind of like a pendulum. You could say things kind of they go back and forth. Sometimes they're a little more extreme, more centralized, more moderate, and then a little more extreme. And I think in many ways it's from a wide range of factors, which I also won't go into because we'll be here for hours.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
That is, I think, it's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because people think and know that, okay, I can express this and not really fear much. But at the same time, when you have so many different voices about so many different things, that it can create a lot of okay, what's going on here? Confusion and in some ways some chaos. Not in a bad way. It's just that people now I find there's so much out there, it's hard to find consistency. And at the same time, people are like, because of the polarization, as you were mentioning, people were like, oh, it's my way or the highway. We're kind of losing that sense of kind of meeting in the middle.
Yeah, it's hard, right? It's hard to find that point. Yeah, I was also thinking, another just point that came to my mind, which we were speaking previously a lot, is that the U.S. is also, you said, is also like a self-driven society in the sense that, like you as an individual, you have a lot of power. These are literally your words. I'm just rephrasing to actually determine the outcomes of a lot of things.
Yeah, I think there's a term that I've been told. I think it's called rugged individualism. And a lot of people may take that in the wrong way, but in its essence, at least what I believe it is, it's the fact that you can make something out of your life and you can have all this drive and energy to pursue it. It doesn't mean you're going to screw people over or anything else. It just means that I want to make something for myself. And also the idea that, the individual versus the group. A lot of studies, a lot of debate on this, but I think a lot of Americans think the individual can take the lead to help the group and not let the group dictate everything. The group is important, the individual is important. You can't have one without the other. But a lot of Americans are like, well, the group's doing this, I don't want to do that, and I don't mind telling them or showing them why I'm not doing this. And at the same time, that may influence the group and say, oh, he's got an idea or something we could look into as well, and vice versa.
But one question I wanted to ask you is, so yeah, you people do focus on their own outcomes, right? But when it comes to helping others, like how would you rate that aspect? Like do you see like a lot of like community? I mean, it does exist because I've seen it, but like to what extent do you think it's real?
Yeah, I think overall it is something that is still very prevalent. It's still something that happens a lot. I mean, because there are natural disasters that happen, storms, floods, things like that. People come together. You can just watch the news and see a community come together to do that. I do think that we are losing that because of a lot of factors. Especially like the younger generations being more selfish, more instant gratification, and I blame cell phones and social media as a big problem for that. Also something I can go into for a long period of time, but not for this episode. But
absolutely.
But I think in general, people still have a strong desire and sense of obligation to help each other. And you can see this all over the place. And it's something that I think a lot of people on the outside don't see, but once they're here, depending on where they are and what they do, they will see this more and more. And that can start on the ground of just helping someone on the street, like they help, like those people in Philadelphia who helped you, up to like, oh, the house is burning down. People get together and help get someone out or get some valuables out of the house.
I mean, the reason why I'm asking this is because I'm thinking this from my own experience, like speaking with people around campus, is that, well, again, I'm a little bit biased because, a university environment is different from a real life environment. But in university, like people are very self-focused in the sense that, they want to succeed, they want to do that. And then you ask them about like anything else that is not themselves, And particularly, my main question as a foreigner is, tell me about your country, right? Because I want to learn from the natives themselves. Like, tell me about your country, right? And, it's not many of the people who have been able to like give me like a good answer to that question. Because, of course, with you, I've learned a lot, right? But there's so many people like, you would think, like local Philadelphians, New Yorkers, Californians, like from lots of places. And, sometimes it seems that like, they know a lot about themselves, their families, their area of expertise, but tell me about the U.S. And they cannot tell me what like their biggest like area of the economy is, or, they cannot describe me politics, nor their history. Tell me about the Vietnam War, and like they might not even know that like which president was involved in it. These things that I it's sometimes important to, knowledge that you gain from a textbook. There is also knowledge that you gain from experience, and also that knowledge that the locals, even though they gain it from a textbook, right? You derive your own conclusion, and I want to learn about that. But apparently, it gave me the impression that people weren't that. They didn't really care about their country other than the fact, I'm an American, and that perhaps gives me the right to abide here. But other than that,
I would say I've encountered the same thing, I find it depends on where they're from, what their family's like. It depends on a lot of factors. Like a lot of younger people, they're not interested in those things. I think it's unfortunate, but it's just the truth. They're interested more in the stars, social media, music, those types of things. But you will find people, and I think even some more. I'm from the Midwest. It's a little more conservative. A little more, not more right or not right or left, for example. I'm saying, but just people here, they tend to be a little more in tune with that. But it depends on each family and how the child is taught by their parents and things like that. So, but I mean, when I was in college or going to high school, there were a lot of people who didn't know hardly anything about U.S. history or politics or economics. But at the same time, I met people who were very knowledgeable about it. So it really depends on who you meet. But I mean,
like I guess like in here, right? And I think I mentioned this before, but in here, like this knowledge about the Argentine economy, for instance, it already comes like embedded in like everybody. Like everybody knows a little bit about that. And like sometimes, and that is something when people ask me about my country, I think I'm able to answer that question quite well. I can tell a little bit about it, but I'm not exactly. There's a lot I can speak about. But when I'm in the US, I'm trying. Yes, I ask this question, and sometimes even myself, I feel I know more about their own country than they do, and I'm just a foreigner, right? But this is again how I've been, my vision of the U.S. What you see in movies, what you see in stories, what you see in documentaries, because like I was raised watching Nat Geo, for instance, and Discovery Channel. My two favorite channels, and also History. And you see these documentaries, and you see like who's the good guy always in the story? Who was the like? I mean, I'm a little biased here, but like who was like the good guy? Inverted commas in the Cold War and the Second World War, like in all sort of wars you can imagine. It's also the U.S. the way I'm like, yeah, that contributes a lot to the way I construct this like politic view I have about like America.
No, you're dead on, and I was raised in a similar way. I watched a lot of educational television growing up, thanks to my family. But a lot of kids don't get that, and they don't really, they're not given a platform where they yearn to learn more about it, because it just boils down to parenting, and it also boils down to just so many things. I mean, we could write a book about this literally. But it is definitely sad to see how many Americans don't know a lot about their own country. And honestly, I think that is stoking a lot of the problems now here with a lot of the issues, because if people actually learned their history, learned about what happened when, how, who, where, what, why, whatever, they would at least have a better understanding of what policies have already been done to address certain things, what things have not been done, what needs to be improved, what does not need to be improved. There's still plenty of things that need to be improved, but it would give them a better foundation for their own views and beliefs.
Yeah, speaking of that point, the one last I would the thing that's in the U.S. You have you work hard, achieve your things, but at the same time, it's also I've seen in the U.S. a somewhat how would I say it, not the most equal society there is. There's a very, very, very big middle class, but there's also poverty, and there's also famous 1%, which have as much wealth as the remaining 99. And with that said, it's some, folks, education, which is a big problem. And then with access to also information itself, some people might be ignorant about the choices they make, and then when election time comes, at least from what I hear from the people who do advocate in the university, they're clueless about how, well, as you were just saying a second ago, how policies that this one government is planning to implement, if elected or not, or I don't know, how will they affect them? How will they affect their countries? Because there's this feeling that despite the policy not affecting you directly, it is still an important policy, right? If it is a policy about like a carbon tax or a policy about agriculture, it still affects you enormously, even though it doesn't affect you as an individual right now. So that is one thing that I've seen. It's not a totally research topic. Trying to
no, it's not. And there's a lot of research that I think is being done and should be done about this, because I think that's one thing. I think Americans, they're so like, oh, I have all this stuff, and they don't feel they need to worry about a lot of things. But I think that that boils down to like what I said before. But I think one thing that we can definitely improve on is just political awareness, economic awareness, historical awareness, and many others, and I definitely try to do that, and a lot of my friends try to do that, but there are so many other people who don't, and it comes down to mentality, what beliefs they have, what they've inherited from their families, or who influences them. But all those factors are at play, and I think that is one area of the U.S. both there are people who really do well in that, but there are also those who do very poorly, and that's something I think that can be improved. And it goes down to education. The education in the U.S. is very good overall, but it's still not equal to the level that it should be.
It should. No, totally. And speaking again, taking that point of inequality there, I remember seeing that public schools, which are like the vast majority that you find in the U.S., they're funded by the taxes of that one neighborhood in which they are.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, a school that is in a poorer neighborhood will, of course, have less resources than a school that is in a richer neighborhood.
Exactly. In the U.S., a city's taxes are an indicator of how strong the school system is.
Yeah, absolutely. So like perhaps where you're born, in a way, actually determines a lot.
Yes, very much so. It's
It's like
unfortunate.
if you're born, you could be like a genie there, and I can tell you a lot. But and the same way I can tell you a lot, I can be wrong by a margin of 50% because again, the U.S. is a place where you make your own luck.
Exactly. So that's kind of the thing. That's the thing. People can, regardless of where they're born to, they can let that determine where their life takes them, or they can try to make something more of that. So, and many people do both. And I think that. So I think we have to be cautious when it comes to people are born in certain conditions. That's how they're going to be. That's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
It boils down to the individual and the individual completely.
Yeah, like how resilient you are in the
Exactly.
face of crisis, and how much effort you're willing to put. Because of course, anything in life it's easy. It will take a while. It will take a certain amount of time. So like that luck, it's not easy achieve like attainable.
No, and I think and it goes back to just. I think that's why, like I said, going back to what we said earlier, I think that's why immigrants here, when they come here, especially if they come from places where they don't have a lot of the things that they can enjoy here, they just eat it up and they go on to start businesses. They become very much into their communities. They buy into a lot of stuff because they appreciate it more. Someone who's born here and it's just normal. What's around me?
Totally.
So, well, it's just like that's the problem with generations. Like one generation, like World War II, all those people who fought in that war, they never want to have a war again. But every generation we go away from that lesson is lost because people didn't live through it.
I am confident, right, with all of the things that are happening right now, that we'll see a future generation that is being born right now, or those who are children right now, that they will bring a lot of great change. As old-fashioned people, they begin to have a less of a call on how things are done domestically. That's when the U.S. will see some. If you want to quote the president, if you don't, I mean, for me, it has always been great in the country, really. And it's not that you can make it again great, but I think in the future will be even greater.
Well, as they say, greatness, and truth, whatever, is all determined by our points of view. I think that's just a universal rule.
If you're happy with what you have, then that's the way to you. It's
take two people. This person, they think everything's fine. Take the other person, everything's wrong. We need to fix everything. It's based on.
Or you take the average, and the average is it's okay.
Exactly. Yeah, Andy. I think you've hit it on the mark, and I think it's interesting how you kind of given us some of your basic impressions of the U.S., but also we've taken this and kind of gone into this discussion about the things that are happening here and outside the U.S. and how you view them versus how I or the Americans would view them. And I think that's something a lot of Americans could use, and also foreigners can use, and those combined experiences and thoughts can really be beneficial to the world population, for all the issues that are happening in everyone's countries right now.
Well, hopefully, I would say, there's no ideal place, like
of course not.
Everywhere you'll find problems and everything. I mean, I am just grateful.
Exactly.
Because that's the overarching feeling in here. Because grateful because it's been like one of those places where I have been well received and so much. I mean, when you're given much, that you want to give back at the same time. When you see so if I can do that, right, that will be my goal, really.
And that's
I guess I don't know, like via publishing science papers, or trying to help the local community in Philadelphia, or just speaking with people around the world, to tell them, try it out, because it can be a great experience.
And you just said it right there. The fact that you already want to give back, that says something right there. And I think, it boils down to, like I said, people need to communicate. We need to, put differences aside. We need to experience different places and other people's lives and surroundings. That will generate much more solidarity and mutual understanding of places. So, yeah. Well, Andy, I mean, it's been a pleasure talking to you, man. And I think all the points we've discussed today are very important and need to be discussed and delved into deeper for sure. So I'd love to carry on this conversation at a later date from the episode. We can talk more about the U.S. What you like about it, and we can carry on other topics involving this, but maybe not with the U.S. but others. So again, it's been a pleasure to have you again, man. You've given some great content and you've provided some great viewpoints and thoughts. So I just want to thank you again for being on this episode again today.
It was a pleasure, Sean, and thank you for inviting me as usual.
No problem, man. My pleasure. And so stay in touch. And this has been another episode of International Immersion. Check us out on Anchor, Spotify, and now iTunes. Leave us thoughts, comments, and if you have any questions, thoughts, or anything you would like us to cover, shoot us an email at internationalimmersionpodcast@gmail.com, and we will take it into consideration. So until next time, thank you for tuning in for another episode, and we will see you on the next one.